Hello and welcome back to the Motogp Xtra podcast. I'm Rhys, and joining me as usual to discuss the events of this weekend's GP is my co-host Dill. Now, of course, Misano, basically the second Italian Grand Prix, always a bit of a wild one, not even just from a racing standpoint, but just from the fans and the atmosphere, is always a fantastic one. And with it being so exciting and crazy, Moto 3 has got to be the place to start. So we'll get straight into Moto 3, and really the start of the race started with Jaume Masia. Obviously, he's trying to rebuild his championship hopes. Of course, they've took a bit of a hit in some of the previous rounds, but Catalunya was a good bounce back for him, and he's trying to keep that form going, and he was trying to pull away from the front. So I'll pass it over to you, Dill. What did you make to Masia's start to the race?
It was exactly what can happen at Misano. It's obviously, compared to the previous round, just not as flowing. There's a couple of straights. A lot of people would probably think that the Tremonto down to Caro is just flat out and it's easy. It still takes quite a bit of skill to even go flat through there on a Moto 3 bike, so even though you have a lot of slipstream down there, it's not as like a Mugello where it's just slipstream pass, because there's still corners effectively, so it isn't one of the tracks where you get massive groups usually. Masia got to the front, and in fairness, I think about 1.5, 1.6 I got up to, until Anchu got to second, and I think Anchu then just had a bit more, especially when he had clear track, and I think they all kind of knew in the top 5 that they go, right, Masia pulls away, we're kind of battling for second. If we just kind of work together somewhat, we can catch him. And it kept the race interesting, because when I went above a second, I was like, ooh, we could be watching an older school Moto 3 race where there's a breakaway winner. We haven't had one in recent times over the last couple of races, so it was a good attempt from Masia, and he used his brain when he was being caught. He kind of just rolled out, goes, right, I'm in a different type of race now, I need to save a bit of rubber for the last couple of laps, but this has failed. But yeah, it was a good attempt from him, and I think he learned from his mistakes in Silverstone not to go above and beyond trying to pull. He was just trying to maybe go 98% instead of just going all out attack, because he threw away a good set of points at Silverstone with the mistake, doing pretty much the same thing. So it's clear that he is kind of learning from his mistakes, which is one of probably Messia's biggest traits, that he's not learned from his mistakes over the previous 4 or 5 seasons in the class. So again, each week we kind of talk about how he's improving, and today was another one of those facts. You could just see when it got under a second, the gap just collapsed, because he was like, okay, they're there now, there's no point me trying to stress my tyre too much to get away. And he had a great race overall, and again, very smart from him, which is probably why he's doing so well on that Honda compared to the others, and the only one up there really.
Yeah, you make a good point talking about how he sort of learnt from his mistake from Silverstone, because of course it was another track where the Honda was working quite well, because the Honda wasn't actually too bad at Misano, seemingly. We had Kaito Toba on the front row somehow. I don't know if you saw that one come in, you must have a crystal ball, because Toba's kind of in the doldrums for years, so it was good to see him back near the front, but it was definitely a bit of a surprise. But yeah, it's good that Masia's learnt from his mistake, because like you say, he got reeled in a little bit at Silverstone, tried to push harder, ended up going down. On this occasion, he tried to make the break, because like you say, again, we've seen this happen at Misano before. I think Finati did it a few years ago. It is something that you can do at Misano, because it's got straights, of course, but they're not massive. There's not like loads of massive straights together. Like, there is a bit of a break, and with those fast right-handers, it does take so much skill to carry the speed through there. You actually can. The rider can make a difference, and I think that's when you see these races where a few pulled away, because even though obviously Masia failed to pull away, it did still break the group up a bit, because of course it started off with a bit of a group of 8, but then it did sort of close down to the top 4: Masia, Anchu, David Alonso, and David Munoz. So I definitely felt for Masia a little bit during that race. I would not want those 3 guys behind me. I don't know about you, but they're known for their aggression. Alonso, not too bad. He's usually pretty clean with it, but Anchu and Munoz definitely have a bit of a habit of perhaps knocking off the other riders. But that's how it sort of kicked off into the second half of the race. And to be fair, I was pretty impressed with them. I don't know about you, but they actually did keep it pretty clean. Sat behind Masia for a while, but then they did start to scrap it out a little bit. But again, it was all fair racing.
Yeah, to be honest, it was like really, Masia was me and I was racing 3 of you. It was just that kind of side of race. Really.
Yeah.
But in fairness, they had their sensible hats on today, all 4 of them really, and it was a clean race. Obviously, we had drama in the last race in Catalunya, where on the last half lap 2 people crashed, and there was penalties and all sorts of shenanigans. So I think they were all probably thinking, I think they all knew as well at the front that they were like, well, Holgado's not been all weekend. We can't really afford to take each other out here. It's like there's probably a bit of the mentality is like us finishing first to fourth, regardless of which one of us finishes where, is better for all of our championships than taking 5 points off you and 5 points off me or whatever. So I think they were all quite mature. It was a nice group of 4. Again, I think it was Haji made the remark of that poor Misano up against the 3 of them. It would be like 3 Marcuses or Valentinos where they're just killers around you. So for him to get out such a good result out of it was brilliant. But they were pretty good. And I think, again, like you said, when Misano went to run away, the 3 that went with him really split the race up. And then we had kind of a group of 4 and a group of 4 and then back to the kind of top 15. So it was spread out race really for Moto 3, but it was a tactical race, and I think it was one of the cleaner races I remember. And to be fair, the last lap and the last corner, I do remember coming into Caro on the last lap from the helicopter shot, and just the shapes Misano was pulling was immense. I was convinced he was going to crash.
Me too.
It was just some serious bike control. But yeah, the 4 of them were clean, and it was this. Not Alonso, the other one. Munoz had a huge moment in turn 2, and that was just his race over. I think.
Still don't know how he saved that.
Exactly. To be fair, the fact because you could see he just lost touch with him, and I think he's one of those riders. He's great in the battle. He's probably not your natural born leader kind of rider. He's probably better when he's in the pack and he's using other people as braking markers and that kind of style of race. So when he did lose the second or so from the incident in turn 2, that was kind of his race on, and the battle for the podium was just the 3 boys, and that was pretty cool down to the last corner.
Yeah, it's always good to see those last lap battles at Misano. We've had plenty over the years in the different classes, so it is good. It just provides, it's got so many different kinds of corners that it does really provide that. You've got like the fast tightening right-handers, so if you are a bit of a corner speed guy, it's difficult to actually pull a pass in the right-handers themselves, but you can get close enough to send it into Caro, obviously the turn 14, and then you've got, obviously, Rio is another good dive bombing opportunity. You've got the flip-flop at the start of the lap. There is plenty of, even though it's actually known as a bit of a track that's difficult to pull a pass on a last lap, there's a few places where you can kind of send it a little bit.
Quercia and Tremonto as well, like, so there's plenty of places.
Yeah, Quercia and Tremonto, of course, yes. So even though it's difficult to pull the pass on the last lap, when you go in that last little bit, it does give you some good battling, and it was all good and fair. I'm with you. I don't know how Masia stayed on. I definitely thought he was going down there because he tried the double pass, didn't he? And to be fair, I've been very impressed with him, just the way he's been going about it. That's 2 races in a row he's tried a double pass right at the end of the race. So he's certainly trying. And to be fair, again, you did make mention earlier about the Hondas, that he is the only Honda anywhere in the front. So he's also clearly riding above his machinery, which is even more impressive when you take that into account. But speaking of impressive, David Alonso, he has turned into he's always been a fantastic rider, of course, but he's found his form, and he has just become the expert, the master of the last lap. Aggressive, clean. He sits there in the group. He's got the pace. Even when perhaps on a Friday it doesn't look like he's going to be the fastest guy, he's always there come the last lap on Sunday. And once again, the benefactor. He puts himself in the right position, ends up making the great pass, takes another win. I just can't believe his second half of the season. Ever since that summer break, he's obviously hit a bit of a reset. Not that he was doing badly before, let's be real, but he wasn't, fighting for the win every week in, week out. But now, just ever since Silverstone, turns up there, didn't know the track, wins it. He's had a bit of a blip at Austria, but again, he was actually leading the race when he fell out of that position. Catalunya obviously wins it. Another win then now here at Misano. And I believe he's now sort of in contention of the championship. So I don't have enough words to say about this kid, but I don't know if you have the points to hand. But I know he's not that far off now with another weekend that wasn't great for Holgado.
He has 21 points. There's 5 riders separated by 21 points. He is 5th.
Oh, he's only 21 points back. That's unreal.
That's doable.
He actually could win it.
Yeah, he could. For example, he's 4 points behind Onchu, 9 behind Masia. Sasaki is the one who's in P2. He's only 4 points behind Holgado, and he's the one that kind of surprised me really because he's not really done much really. He had a good run of podiums, I think, for a while. I think that's kind of forgotten. Like he had the rough start, he had the couple of crashes, and like obviously in I have his results here, and he was second from Le Mans up until third in Austria, and So
I
yeah,
suppose you forget like Saxon Ring as well. He led most of that race till on
yeah, that's true. I suppose coming second, third for 5-6 rounds in Moto 3 is kind of enough to kind of get you there when the likes of
that is the
Holgado.
champion. That's how you win that championship. Yeah.
Holgado's just dropped the ball since the summer break. Kind of before, obviously, we had the poor round in the Netherlands, crashing there. 2 podiums and then again crashing out last week. So that's 2 big holes there for him. And again, no points to them, right in saying finished P16. So
yeah, I don't know what was wrong with him because he was in the lead group to begin with, but then he just seemed to fade. I don't know whether he had a bike problem or whether he was just struggling, but he was up there to start with, but then I just slowly saw his name drop down during the race.
Yeah, he was around P14 and then somehow in the last 2 laps ended up out of the points. But back to Alonso, absolutely amazing. What he's doing for South America, getting them back on the map. We haven't had Yanni Hernandez, the last Colombian I can think of, probably one of the only ones. There's not been many.
He's the only one, I think.
There's not been many from South America make it, and I can definitely say there's not been a South American in recent times who've had such promise. We've had Moreira, but he's kind of gone cold. He had a couple of races, but he was never this sort of racing from him. He was kind of a rookie in the top 6, top 8, and he was doing well and putting in good laps in qualifying, but he wasn't winning 3 out of 4 races, kind of, and leading the other one. Alonso,
could be a question mark over his team. In fairness, it's not. It's a very young team.
Could be.
Whereas obviously Alonso and Aspar know how to win.
I suppose Aspar, you're probably your factory team in Moto 3 these days.
Yeah,
but I just don't know what to say about Alonso. He's just been so good. And I feel like he's going to continue this form. I feel like he's like he just seems to have so much about him. When he gets to the last couple of laps, he just always seems to be in the right place. He took the overtake on, was it Messia into Tremonto? Then Messia went for the double overtake. Then he undercuts them both and gets them to the line. It was just, he can just see 3 corners in front of him in a way that he goes, right, if I pass him here, I'll get to run through Caro or through Carvone. If I don't get him into Caro, I can try it into Misano corner. He has a lot of probably, he's a very good racing brain, I suppose, as well as the fact he's outrageously quick. So there's just so much going on there. He's so much talent, and he's a joy to watch because he's definitely keeping it interesting. The fact he's only 21 points off now. The only question I put to him is, we're going to what we call the flyaway race now, where you get mixed weather, and as well as if you're in the title hunt, there's a sort of pressure that comes when you're being named each week as he has a chance of winning it. Up until today, really, nobody's even thought about his championship. It's just been, this rookie's doing amazing, he's won another race, great job, great racecraft, whatever. Now the fact he's going into the last 7 rounds, 8 rounds, and maybe he could win the championship. He has to perform today. He's only P9 in the grid. That's not very good for someone who wants to win this championship. So a lot of things can change in terms of the media outlook on you. So I just hope that he keeps his focus on track and not kind of what's been going on off track with, he's definitely in the championship hunt now. Surely he's the man with the form. He's been quicker than Sasaki, and surely he'll beat Holgado in you would imagine, a better team. So I just hope that overall he keeps his form going, and it isn't something like Arbolino where all the off-track stuff just seems to take away a couple of % of his racing, and we see kind of a lull. So again, hats off to him. He's been amazing today, so I can only credit his racing. It was brilliant. Great watch.
Yeah, he really is just fantastic. There's not much more you can say about him. He is amazing, but you actually do make a good point there about the flyaways. That probably will be something we do dwell on when we're talking about some of these championships. That, of course, the next round's India, which I think we are going to talk about in a little bit, but provided there is a race there, that's a new track no one's ever been to before, so we don't know what the form book will be like there. Of course, then you've got Motogp, you've got Thailand, you've got Indonesia. Don't know, I think it's Indonesia, then Thailand, actually, but you got all these flyaways. These obviously will be completely new races to Alonso. Not that he's probably that bothered because he did win at Silverstone, which he'd never been to before, but these are the kind of tracks where it's going to help someone like Messia or Sasaki, even over Holgado, because Holgado has been there previously, but not as many times. Whereas, you've got your Messias and your Sasakis, they've been in the championship for years, knocking around. So, it's definitely. Hopefully, the pressure doesn't get to him too much, and hopefully, he doesn't sort of crumble in the flyaways with the new circuits. But if it does, he's had a great rookie season, and I'm sure he'll be able to hit a reset for next season. Now, we have got the notes here about Messier, but I think we probably spoke about him a decent bit before when we were on about him pulling away. So he sort of put his championship back on. So I'll move on to Chu. Obviously, the other guy really in the lead group that we haven't spoke about too much so far. He seems to have a bit of a knack for getting to the front of the chasers and be able to hunt down the guy in the lead. Obviously, he did it at Saxon Ring to fantastic effect with Sasaki. And once again today, he sort of got to the front. We know Chu, he's known for hitting his seat, sort of just trying to get other people to follow him. It never really works, but in fairness, he got to the lead of the chasers and he hunted down Messier. Now, of course, I think Messier probably did start to back off once he realised he was being caught, obviously to make sure he didn't overstress his tyres and crash or anything like that. But it was a great ride from Chu, and then he was kind of sat there. You do feel for him because he clearly does lose time on the straights. Now, I suppose his size does give an advantage in some other elements like the chicanes and things like that, but you do feel sorry for him because he definitely loses time in places. He lost a lot of time, obviously then the run through the right-handers on the last lap, but he did then make a little mistake and run wide, so it was definitely a shame for him, but it's still a good ride, still on the podium, and of course, like we've said, now properly in contention for the championship himself.
Yeah, and in fact, he's in the championship as a mystery, really, because throughout the season, we probably said, oh my god, another silly race, another stupid mistake from Chu. But of late, again, probably around the time of the summer break, he's come back, he's been pretty consistent. I think Saxon
take Catalonia's last quarter out of it. And
we'll just glance over that. We'll forget about that. He was consistent for the whole race, bar the last corner. We'll put it at that.
Yeah. It's not been bad all season, really, but...
Again, I go back to Argentina. He still had... That was bonehead from him there.
That was ridiculous.
He'd be leading the championship if he didn't do that, put it that way.
Well, that is true. That is very true. Yeah.
If you put it in black and white, like it's just he had them mistakes in him, and up until Saxon Ring has completely changed his whole demeanour in the class. He's more confident. He seems like he seems more relaxed in races where he doesn't feel, oh my god, I have to really push so hard so I can give myself every opportunity. Kind of like we said every week with Canet, who we'll come to later. Just we feel like that when a rider's building and feels like he needs to get it off his chest and get that kind of monkey off his back. He's gotten it done now, and he just seems more relaxed, and he seems cooler in the last couple of laps. Now he's still on, he's still crazy, but you don't feel like that he's gonna. He understands the last couple of laps is what I'm trying to say. Really, he's more accustomed to know, right, if I'm P4 in the last lap, I can still win it. I don't need to take all three riders into turn one. I can do it throughout the lap. And I think up until when he won in Saxon Ring, there was just, you get the last 4 laps and he had a chance and he'd just go, right, qualifying lap, I'm going to punt everyone off the track, I'm going to brake as late as I can. And he just would kind of end up getting beaten by someone like Holgado or Sasaki or whatever, someone a bit cooler in the last couple of laps and a bit more racecraft. But he's been unlucky this season again. I feel like a lot of times if we go back to Mugello, his height really played against him there. He was really quick there. I think his height plays more of a disadvantage than advantage. I know heavy braking, kind of the air brake of being slightly bigger, being able to muscle it around a bit more. But I just feel he loses so much time in the straights. I'm actually looking forward to him leaving the class. I want to see him on a bigger bike because I reckon his whole style doesn't really suit a Moto 3. He drifts it a lot, and that's not really a Moto 3 style. It's never been a class where you want to be sideways. It's kind of a wheels in line to the most point. So seeing him on a Moto 2 bike will be fairly interesting, and I think he'll gel with that pretty quickly. So again, once he keeps performing throughout the season, he is probably out of the top 4. He's top 5. He's probably my least likely to win the championship at the moment. I just think that they will get to tracks like I could see him getting out dragged in Thailand to the last corner because of his height. I could see him having issues in Phillip Island out of the last corner. I just think of most tracks that go, right, well, he's probably going to get dragged to the final corner at Sepang and he'll probably lose it there. Unless he can have runaway races, it's going to be hard for him to win races. So again, if you look at his Saxon Ring, it was a lunge into the final corner, a block pass, and just about won that one. So it's going to be tough for him to win races. And I think like Alonso winning currently at the moment, Holgado, if he kind of gets back to the front, it seems very good at getting to the right positions at the right time. I think Sasaki is very quick. I just think he struggles a bit more in the last 3 laps sometimes. So at the moment, Chu isn't my man for the title, but he's having a good season, like you mentioned. Again, got the win off his back, got his Moto 2 seat, so all is going his way, really.
Yeah, I think you're probably right with that one. It's going to probably be difficult for Chu to win the championship. believe he actually did do a test for Moto 2. I think when they were testing, like sort of last week, they were doing the Pirelli test. I think he did get to have a bit of a go on the Moto 2 bike, and I think he seemed to enjoy it. I believe I heard the commentator say that, if I'm not mistaken. So
I did see a picture of him sitting on his bike. Whether he rode it, I don't know.
Yeah, but he must have rode it then, I guess.
Yeah,
but,
you imagine so.
I would imagine he's probably being fitted up to one of those IO seats for next season in the Moto 2 class.
Yeah, I imagine
would
so.
have thought, since it sounds like there's going to be 2 free seats there, so imagine that at least one of them will go to him. But from one Red Bull rider to another, Holgado, the championship leader. So again, we have touched on him a little bit, but I suppose we'll talk about him in a bit more detail. He seems to be sort of choking a little bit. He's definitely struggling these last few rounds. Obviously, he's been pretty great. He's not exactly been a win hound all season. Obviously, he won the first round at Portimao, but then he's kind of been there or thereabouts, top 5 podiums throughout the season until we got to Assen. Obviously, had the blip there, was okay at Silverstone, but then and obviously Austria, I think he got on the podium again there. But the last couple of rounds, he's kind of just started to struggle. Obviously, he didn't have a great weekend at Catalonia, was struggling, ended up crashing, which was a bit of a silly thing to do, cost himself a lot of points because, all right, maybe he wasn't on it, but he probably would have still finished like 8th or something like that. And you never know with all the carnage that happened at the last corner with the Onshu and like Munoz, he probably could have got maybe in the top 5 potentially with once the penalty had been applied. So he threw away a decent amount of points there. And then this weekend, he was just slow. He just dropped back. So, like I said, I don't know if he had a problem, but it seems to me like maybe the pressure of the championship fight is getting onto him. We do know that there's not going to be any kind of wrangling for seats in the background because he's already said he's actually going to stay in Moto 3 next year, regardless of what happens with the Tech 3 team. So, not got any that kind of thing overshadowing him. So it just seems to me like he's just struggling with the fact that perhaps he's being sort of caught in the championship and the pressure's just on him a bit more now.
Yeah, like he was top 6 every race up until Sachsenring. Then we go to Assen and crashes. And I think what happens there is he crashes in the last race before the summer break, and that's probably the worst thing that obviously is the worst thing that could happen going into a summer break. But it looks like he hasn't really reset from that. He didn't take the 5 weeks and go, right, I've been 1st, 4th, 5th, 6th, whatever in the first few rounds, and I have a nice points advantage. I'm probably the most consistent. I'm in a decent team. He's probably thought, oh my god, I threw away X amount of points that week. What if that comes against me? What about the flyover? It looks like he's just gotten in his own head about the crashes. And then, to be fair, came back in Silverstone, podium, Austria podium, looked like everything was going well. And then crashes last week out of his home race when he, again, just looked like he wasn't at the races. And I wonder, is he kind of thinking, well, I overrode last week in Spain and crashed. Maybe this week I'll just take a step forward or take a step back to go forward, and it's just not worked for him. And I think it just isn't clicking at the moment. It's kind of showing a bit like Arbolino in Moto 2, where it's just slightly gone downhill and he just doesn't look like he has the control to bring it back. Now we're going to India next week or 2 weeks time, so that will probably be a plain empty field for everyone. That it'll just be a reset. So if he has good result there, we're going into the immediate flyovers that we're used to, the Japan, Indonesia, Phillip Island. So the next couple of rounds are crucial for his championship, that he builds back up some sort of stability and gets good points back on the board. If he loses the championship in the flyovers, I could see it being done. Realistically, anything can happen in the flyovers. We are well aware that we could have monsoons in Indonesia. We've seen before. Sepang, the humidity, anything can happen there. Phillip Island is one of those tracks where if you're not at it, you're 20th. It's just one of those tracks. So we're going into a critical part of the season now, and he's just having a dip that he didn't need. Now, he's in a good team. He's one of the quickest riders in the class. We raved about him all season. I just think he needs a bit of a reset. I think having a weekend off now, just to go to India, get set and go again, and hopefully if he gets a good result there, that could just kickstart his flyaways, and then he might be able to kind of rally himself back into the championship, because at the moment it's just slipping. He had a decent points advantage pretty much up until Aston. We were kind of like probably one hand on the championship. We felt it was a bit like Moto 2 with Acosta, where it's like, yeah, this is kind of done. Like, realistically, he's probably going to maybe just wrap it up with two or three rounds to go if he keeps going the way he was. But just shows bike racing is not as simple as is on paper. Everything happens at all times, can change it, and one crash in Aston may be the cause of the whole last few rounds. I think he definitely just needs to reset. I think he's probably putting himself under a bit of pressure. Second season in the class. We do forget that he's not a Sasaki who's been there a while. Masia, Anshu, the other kind of 3 out of the 5 he's battling have definitely a lot more experience at holding a championship and understanding the whole season. So he can do it, but it's going to be tough because he's going into races now where he doesn't have as much experience as the other 3 I mentioned, and obviously Alonso's on such a wave of form. It's going to be tough, but if he digs deep, it'll show great character if he can come back and claim this championship after a bad month or so, really.
Yeah, it certainly would. If he can bounce back, that really is the making of a rider, if they can sort of come back from the bad times. But like you said, of course, he is battling sort of another 4 riders. The top 5 are all covered by 21 points. I think it is going to be one of those great Moto3 seasons, because the last couple of seasons, it's kind of been a bit done, or just been between a couple of riders at this point. But 5 of them still covered by 21 points as we go into the flyaways now. To be fair, the flyaways are a lot longer than they used to be. There's a few more in there. Obviously, we've got Qatar as well that's been moved to that point of the season. So there is actually still more races left than you'd think. But even still, I think we could be prepped for a fantastic championship between quite a few different riders. But as we move from one championship that is pretty close to another one that seemed to take a bit of a turning point once again today, Moto 2. We'll start off talking about Aaron Canet, of course, not a championship contender, but you did sort of make reference earlier talking about Canet when you were on about Moto 3 and riders making mistakes and when they're a bit desperate for the wins, a bit like how Onshu was before he got his first victory. Canet running in 3rd place. Again, probably not a chance of winning today, to be fair, based on how good Acosta was. But again, running in top position, probably trying a little bit too hard. Down he goes. That's another load of points down the drain. Not that, again, he was a championship contender, but even still, not a great way to end his race, and off the back of just missing out for that win in Catalonia as well.
Yeah, it's a shame because he was a touch wide. He was just a touch wide, and that was all it took, really. I felt like he was just hanging out. I felt Acosta was comfortable for the whole race. I don't think anything Vietti had, really. We saw Vietti nearly crashed 4 times, I believe. He had 4 big saves, which is
a lot of saves.
Usually, if you have 1, you're lucky. He had 4 just to try and stick with him. Even with like 2 laps to go, he nearly crashed. So Vietti was at 110% home Italian support. Everything was pushing Vietti on in this race, and even still, he couldn't really match Acosta. He kept him honest for a good chunk of the race and kept him hot under the collar for most of the race, but last quarter of the race, really, that was done. With Canet, like I'm looking at his championship results here now, he's so inconsistent. Now, it's only his 4th non-score, which isn't actually as bad as I thought, really. But there's a lot of races where he's just gone missing, which is the issue with his season. And I think he has a good race weekend, then goes missing, and then comes back, and he's like, oh, I'm on it this weekend. I have to try that extra hard, and then ends up crashing. So it will come from next year. It looks like Acosta will be gone. Arbolino will be still there. Chances of him winning then goes up, moving to the Fantic team. Obviously, we've seen their proven race winner this season with Vietti. So maybe next year. I think he's another one that just needs to relax when he gets in the position. I think he's better off taking P3, P4, P2, whatever it may be, instead of crashing out. Crashing is the worst thing he can do. It'll only knock his confidence more and make him choke and struggle and tense up in these moments where he might have the pace to win these races. I think Dixon is a great advocate of, I only have pace with 3rd today, that's what I'll do. I think he had a bit of the Dick Canet where, oh my god, this weekend I've qualified 4th and, well, I kind of have Acosta's pace and I can match X, Y, and Z, and then 4 laps in his bin, and you're like, oh well, there's kind of no need to that. You had a good chance at the podium today. I think Canet just needs to put podiums on the board, build up a good rhythm, run of form, and then maybe when the chance comes, he won't be as so trigger happy with it, and then maybe it might happen. Now again, I think he's going to need a bit of luck because I never seen him put a race weekend together where I think, oh, he's definitely going to win. He's always thereabouts most weeks. Obviously, he has his weekends where either injury or just the bike doesn't work for him, or he just isn't at the races. But that happens to every rider on Moto 2. Moto 2 is one of those classes, so tight, equal equipment throughout the field. So yeah, it's just a small mistake today that cost him a podium, but I'm sure he'll know that already by the time he pick up the bike.
Yeah, I think you made a good point there that you are going to have these weaker weekends. I mean, look at last race winner. Where was he today? He was battling with Bo Ben Schneider for like P13, like the whole race. Obviously, I know there's circumstances around that with his qualifying, but just shows you only need to make a mistake. Because let's be honest, right? If Acosta started 14th, he's not finishing 14th. He's going to fight his way through. So it does show that you have these sort of off weekends sometimes. And I think with Canet, you're probably right. He does need to just sit there and take stock. As I always say, you're going to be second place so many times until the leader crashes. And if you've already fell off, that's no good, is it? So you need to be running in these podium positions. If he was running, if he didn't have the pace to go with those guys, why not try and settle for third? I mean, maybe at the end of the race, their tyre might go off. You might catch them up a little bit. You don't know how hard they're pushing. You may as well just make sure that you put yourself in the best position, and that is staying on the bike at the end of the day and not doing silly things like Catalonia. He did look really desperate for that first win, and we've seen that in other races as well. And it just seems like whenever he thinks he has the chance for a good result, he crashes. Now, I think that's always been a bit of a Canet trait, even in Moto 3, from what I remember of his Moto 3 career. So, yeah, it's going to be difficult, and maybe the Pons team is winding down a little bit. We do know it's leaving at the end of the season, so perhaps maybe there is an element of behind the scenes stuff, but yeah, just another mistake, and you don't win races by crashing out of them. So that's obviously the main thing he does need to address. But a rider that did pretty well today, Manuel Gonzalez. I'm quite a big fan of him. I'm quite impressed with him generally. He's had quite a few fifth places, I believe. I think he's had about like 3 or 4 this season, and he was pretty good today. Yeah, it was pretty good. His pace, kind of faded a little bit towards the end, but again on the front row, building obviously on the great result the great race he had in Catalonia. Does seem like you say he finished 7th. I couldn't remember exactly where he slipped to. I know he slipped back a little bit. It was a similar kind of thing. I guess he probably finished about 7th in Catalonia as well. Seems to be that he's kind of slipping back as the races go on, so perhaps struggling with looking at the tyre, but the pace is clearly there. His start wasn't great today. It did obviously cost him quite a bit. Well, actually, his start wasn't too bad. It was more once they got to turn 1, he kind of got a bit squeezed and dropped back. But again, I'm quite impressed by him because he is showing good pace. Obviously, put it on the front row. We have said there's question marks over the team. Obviously, it is Yamaha funded. It's VR46 associated, so I would assume there's enough probably funding there. But in terms of the actual quality of the team, I believe it's sort of like the ex-Petronas team. I think they sort of just bought that entry and all the equipment and probably most of the staff, and that was an okay team. But remember, sort of when we had like Dixon and Vierge, they kind of did go missing quite a lot. So definitely probably some question marks over the team itself. But I think he's done a pretty good job, obviously destroying his teammate Nazani, who's having a very rough time. And I think I'd like to see Manuel maybe in a different team, see how he gets on. A bit more of a proven one, a bit like you might be the SUIO. I know there's probably not necessarily a spot for that, but if he was in another team like that, I'd be interested to see how he gets on, because he has these performances now and again. Like I said, he's had 5th place quite a few times, but quiet weekends. But putting it on the front row, running pretty well. Obviously, yeah, it's not quite worked out for him, but I think he's building. And as the rider that's come the hard way as well, he's not exactly come through Moto 3. So similar to how we've seen with a lot of British riders in the past that come from superbike backgrounds, it takes a while to adapt to these bikes, adapt to this paddock and the different tracks and stuff. So they always do need a little bit more time. But so far, I think he's been doing a pretty good job, especially this season anyway.
Yeah, he definitely has speed. I just don't think he has like I mentioned, the team probably isn't a Premier Class team. I just think, just in terms of the fact he does seem to use more tyre, I just don't think the bike is as set up as probably ideal for him as it could be. Most weeks he shows pace throughout the race, just seems to go backwards. So I think there's a bit of a rider. I suppose the rider probably needs to just mature a small bit and just learn this class. You can't really push early. Like if you look back to his Cataloni, he took the lead. Dixon was just so cool about it. He just goes, yeah, take it. I know that this is my pace. I know how long I can take these tires and how far. And it just looked like Gonzalez just was like, right, I'll go to the front and I'll see what I can do. And when my tires go, I'll fall back, and we'll just hope that I don't fall too far really. And I think again today, had the speed, but just as the race goes on, the tire just doesn't stay with him as much. So I wonder, is that more riders or more team? But either way, I think maybe together they can come to a better solution. But yeah, you do say that it would be nice to see him in a better team. I look at Arenas going to Mark VDS, and I wonder, wouldn't they be better to take a punt on a younger rider like that? They could kind of mold a bit better, because he's
news
clearly,
to me.
he's what?
Renas to Mark VDS, that's news to me.
I'm fairly sure that's where he's going.
It's Salaj. Salaj is going to Mark VDS.
Where's Arenas going?
Home. I don't know. Fantic, I think, right, was linked to one point. I don't think it's going to Mark VDS.
Another person is signed for Fantic.
Yeah, I think we had this joke before that like half the paddock signed to Fantic. I don't know where Renas is going.
I was convinced he was going to Mark VDS.
Because Arbolino's staying and Salaj was signed a while ago.
Well, that is news to me. Well, anyway.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you. Just
no, you're 100% right.
This one.
I was convinced he was going.
Maybe find where Arenas is going.
Yeah, I'm convinced he was going there, so he must have some contract.
Yeah, he probably has something. Yeah,
that's strange. Anyway, that kind of ruins my point of that why we decided Arenas over Gonzalez. But anyway, Gonzalez is definitely deserving of a better seat. Is the bottom line of that kind of whole jumbled portion there. But at the moment, I just feel his own racecraft and just managing a race isn't there. And I think if you look at Remy Gardner, when he went to IO, turned into a different rider, I think Gonzalez has the potential if he gets into a better team. Just runs off some of the edges, he could be a front runner. And yeah, it'll be interesting to hear where he is going to go if he does leave. I'm not too sure if he'll stay with that team, because I just feel they are not up to his level as a rider. I just think he's been held back maybe a touch.
I think he said he's quite happy to stay there. I think that's his aim. Well, of course, you're going to say that. You're obviously not going to say, yeah, I'm really looking to leave this team. But he's kind of said that. I don't see where he's going to go. I can't find anything about where Renas is going, by the way. But it was just from a quick Google search, so not too sure. But yeah, I think most of those sort of top seats are kind of... IO is the question mark, because there's been a few riders obviously sort of linked to that. We had Vietti was supposedly going there at one point. That could be still on. I think Agora's been linked there. Obviously on Chu as well from Moto 3. So I think those are the two seats really that everybody wants. I don't know if there might be a couple of seats going into that GP. I know they've probably not been that great this year, but in the past they've been a pretty solid team. So yeah, there could be some spots up for grabs. I don't know exactly how the grid's going to shake out. So we've got the new MT Helmets team coming in, and obviously there's a couple of spots maybe there. Again, obviously they are still quite a young team. Obviously it will be basically probably the Pons team, but in new colours effectively, which is a pretty decent team again. So yeah, you could potentially go there. There is a lot of sort of question marks over the Moto2 rider lineup. Maybe that's a podcast for itself at some point. But it seems like we're in agreement that we'd like to see Gonzalez in a different team, potentially one that's a little bit better. Not just, obviously, we're not slighting that team at all, the team that he is with, but they're obviously, it's not the A team. Like, you're not going to go there and expect to win the championship, for example. It's one of those kind of teams. And yeah, so it would be interesting to see him in a different one. But moving on to one of those bikes that potentially is available, the IO bike, Pedro Acosta, looks pretty set for this World Championship now. Of course, we know he's going up to MotoGP next season, but what a weekend he had. Enemy territory as well, of course. Main rival, Arbolino, pretty much another home Grand Prix for him, with it being in Misano, which is technically Italy, really. Just looked amazing from FP1, didn't he? It was just fantastic. He had like half a second on like the whole field in one of the practice sessions. It was something ridiculous like that. He was miles ahead. Didn't end up on pole position, but I think he did set the fastest lap of the session. I think he just got cancelled because of yellow flags. But still second place on the grid, which is more than adequate. Took the lead off the start. Didn't look back. He looked comfortable all race, like you said. Obviously, we were talking earlier that was a lot of moments from Vietti. Acosta didn't have any of those. He looked super smooth. Obviously, Canet fell off trying to chase him down. Vietti had a lot of moments. I think in the end he did just kind of think best of it and back off a bit. And in the end, Acosta won by 5 seconds, which is just unbelievable. To do that in Moto2, one of the hardest classes, arguably the hardest class, because everybody's pretty much on the same machinery. So it comes down so much to those fine-tuning bits of setup, and then obviously just so much down to the rider. So to pull 5 seconds on that field, especially again when you're talking about he's pulling away from Vietti, who spends every other weekend riding around the circuit. He knows it better than anybody. So it just phenomenal. Pulling away more points, of course. Obviously, our main rival Arbolino, who had a much better weekend, but even still pulled a few points away from him. At least like sort of 10, 12. I don't know exactly the points gap between first and fourth, but it's something like that. Obviously, a lot of points on Jake Dixon as well. Obviously, having a bad weekend, so just perfect for Acosta. I don't really have any other words. It's just showing why this is going to be his world championship, basically.
He has first off, he has 34 points over Arbolino in second.
Yeah, which is pretty big.
Got back to
Considering
Dixon.
He was 25 down at one point. So
exactly, so the swing really has been crazy considering how consistent Arbolino was at the start of the season, and over the last couple of rounds has gone a bit astray. But he's not been like Olgado. He's not been crashing or finishing out of points. He's just finishing like his last takeout today. Obviously, no points in Barcelona, 6 points for 10th place in Austria, and they're kind of top 10s really, and that's kind of it really. There's nothing special. Whereas Acosta, you look at him, he's third, second, first, sixth, kind of roughly like so. Acosta's just been on the podium, Arbolino's not on it, and week in, week out, that's about 10 points sway each time. So over 6 rounds, that's 60 points, and that's kind of where we're looking at now, where Arbolino's been consistently scoring points, but he's not doing enough to be winning a championship. And Acosta has that kind of Rossi about him where doesn't need to be on pole. If he's roughly towards the front, he has enough about him to get to the front and somehow still win the race. Saw that today. Obviously got a great launch and just never looked back. I wouldn't say Costa by any means is a one lap kind of hot lap hero kind of guy. He seems very much a Sunday man, and figures it out on Sunday. And I think even in his Moto 3 campaign, he was never much of a. I don't think he took that many poles compared to his wins, but yeah,
he had one. He was quite poor in the qualifying.
Yeah, sure. He dominated the races anyway, so doesn't need to. So maybe something he might want to look into improving when he gets to GP. But it's all but set that he will move up, and it's looking like he'll be on a factory bike in Gasgas now. Again, this season, I think every podcast should go back and listen to what we're kind of saying is the current rumor, and it just changes from week to week. From Thursday of this week to Sunday, there's been so much in terms of Marquez. We'll cover that later, but there's just been such a massive sway from done deals being completely done to, oh well, they can't really find a way getting that to happen. So there's just so many different rumors each week, and throughout the week we're hearing so many different things, and it's been one of the most interesting seasons I can remember throughout World Superbikes and GP, where we've had so many different rumors, riders going elsewhere, teams pulling out, and just all sorts of contracts up in the air. So Costa will somehow be on the GP grid next year. I don't think there's any question there. And yeah, he's probably one hand on the championship. We have 8 rounds left. Realistically, if he doesn't have a shocking flyaway, kind of nothing. The only thing is Acosta probably isn't the top guy in the wet. Arbolino definitely will come back in the wet. So if we do get rain in Indonesia and Thailand, for example, the 30 odd points could drop to 10 quite quickly, and then going into the last 3 rounds, if there's within a race distance between them, anything can happen, because the pressure of a championship closing in is always makes cracks and riders that seem invincible. So if he just has a steady time through the flyaways, it's probably his championship really. Just needs to keep going. He's only had the one blip really, which was the Le Mans race. And he's been excellent. Again, kind of running each week we say he's excellent. We're running out of things to say about him. He'll be a special talent when he gets to GP. So yeah, best of luck for the rest of the season, because I just can't wait to see him in GP next year.
Yeah, I think we're all looking forward to seeing that one. I think there'll be some eyes glued to the screen on that pre-season testing. I don't know if they have one at Valencia. I think they have one at Valencia right this year. I know they stopped doing, but then seemed to start. Yeah, because they always used to, and then they kind of stopped it for a year, and
was
then
it for COVID?
Yeah, maybe. But either way, there's going to be eyes glued to the screen when he gets his first test, which will probably be before the end of the season. They do like to. Yeah, I mean, maybe he might ever go tomorrow. Actually, thinking about it,
that wouldn't be a bad shot, actually. Yeah,
because I'm pretty sure they did that for Remy and Raul when they were in Moto 2. So
the only thing I might think of is that the fact is like on we've seen what happened to Toprak when he went on the M1, went back to the R1. He just said it felt weird for him for a while. So maybe they're thinking he's not that. He's not 100 points clear. He's only 30 odd. So maybe they're thinking, get your Moto 2 title done, son, and then we'll get you on the GP bike. So maybe they might wait till after the season just to not to throw any spanners at him.
But either way, I'm sure everyone will be looking forward to that one. And
100%.
Yeah, you run out of words to describe the guy. We know how talented he is, and we know just how good he's going to be when he gets to MotoGP and how good he's been this season. So yeah, there's not exactly a lot else that we can say. Now, throughout, we've kind of alluded to the amount of issues that Vietti had during the race, but he wasn't the only one. Lots and lots of moments throughout that Moto2 race. Obviously, Vietti probably does bring up most of them, but we had quite a few crashes as well. Other little moments. We had quite a few guys seem to lose the front end on the sort of change of direction between sort of turns 1 and 2. Sam Lowe's was caught out with that one. Down he went. So it looked like it was a tricky race. I think it looked like it was quite hot. And I think just sometimes when it gets a bit like that, a bit greasy, just so easy to lose the front. And I think the track is quite ripply in a lot of places by the looks of it also. So yeah, we saw a lot of front and rear end moments in that race.
I do believe AlphaTauri's Formula 1 team used it as a bit of a test track, so that might support the ripples.
Yeah, they do some stuff there, I believe.
I know they do some promotional kind of PR videos.
I know that. Yeah, I know they always do their filming days either there or Imola every year because they're like literally like from Faenza, which is very close. But
yeah, so again, they're probably all their shakedown tests and so forth at that track. So even 1 or 2 Formula 1 cars, the modern day ones going around the track, will create these little ripples. They are that powerful of a car. So it's just one of those. It's the whole aspect of Misano. If you look at turn 1 to turn 5, it's heavy braking, tight corner, heavy braking, tight corner, slight bit downhill, edge of the tire. You're on the edge of the tire, really low speed, which is more stress on a rider on a bike than, we'll say, going through some of the fast stuff, because the bike is more loaded, your center of gravity is different, and your whole overall motion is pushing you through the corner. When you're in first gear at 30 miles an hour on a hairpin at Misano, it's just a bit more stress on and the bike can make a little jolt or whatever can happen. We saw that today, where going through turn 1, one of the slower parts of the track, where you're just changing direction for turn 2. We saw Sam lose it on the change direction. We saw Alonso Lopez go wide as he picked it up as the front started bobbling. We saw Vietti have the slide in turn 1. Firmino Alguer crashed down in 2. Where I think Vietti ran deep a couple of times into Rio, turn 4. So just a lot of the first half of the lap is quite stop-start, and it just was just showing that maybe track temperature is a little higher than they've had all weekend. I think today was definitely the hottest day of the weekend, and I think the fact that they don't get the warm-up, which I'm still not a fan of, because it looks like maybe today Dixon mightn't have had the best bike in terms of it wasn't put back together perfect. Now, not put back together, but you'd always like to run it in a session before you race it after a crash, so you just wonder, was everything perfect? Because he did some very...
he wasn't comfortable with it, like didn't quite have his...
Exactly.
Just to get like a few laps in, just to like... It's just like little things, isn't it? I guess like maybe like little grooves in like the brake lever, like just from like your hand and stuff. Like
yeah, it's just I still don't understand why they can't find a couple of minutes. There's a long day there. It would be
just do it slightly earlier in the day, like
and
do it before MotoGP's warm up, because like MotoGP have the fan show after their warm up, but why don't they just
exactly? I think
you could have like half an hour before that, like you could just there's nothing on track, so I don't.
Yeah, I still think there's plenty of time. I don't really get the reason why there's no warm up. I think it's silly and dangerous. I think most weekends. Just someone who's crashed on their last lap in Q2 and bike's gone head over heels, and you're thinking, oh no, I have to race that tomorrow, without even seeing. Basically, you have a sighting lap, you go to the grid, then you have your warm-up lap, and then you're racing. In fairness, a lot of people do 2 sighting laps to go through the pits, but rolling around on a fresh set of tyres on your first lap of the day, you're not going to be getting the bike into the window of seeing if things are broken or wrong. You're not going to find out till 2 laps in where you go, oh my god, there's a slight bit of chatter and vibration coming from the rear. I wonder what that is. And then you're just thinking, oh no, have I got a bad tyre? Is there something wrong from the crash yesterday? So I think we look at Dixon. I think that was kind of what plagued him for the race. He probably wasn't 100% comfortable on the bike that was crashed and not kind of pushed out again today. It was one of those races where plenty of crashes. Obviously, Foggia and Zonta crashed together. Don't know how that happened. We
Yeah, I've
didn't
not
get any
seen that
replay.
one. Yeah.
Judging that they both crashed at the same time, same corner. I presume one went for the overtake, took out the other. It was
Yeah.
into Carroll. I haven't seen anything from either rider to elaborate on what happened. Thankfully, they both seem to be okay. It was just, there was plenty of crashes throughout the race, and I think it was your
That
typical
was a
Moto.
horrible one with Guevara and Tulic, wasn't it?
Yeah,
As well?
that was. We didn't catch that until the race was over, but that was a scary crash.
I'm not sure what Tulic was doing, really. Just running the back of him.
Yeah, I think a bit of brain fade at the last lap. Maybe he was probably thinking a couple of corners ahead and just kind of some. I don't know. It's hard to kind of think because he does just kind of get in a wrong position and
gets like overtaken, which it is a strange place, but then he just runs into the back of him. I don't really know what he's doing.
It was just a weird one. That was, I think both of them escaped, but that was a real egg beater, that crash. So it was just, overall today was just one of those ones where track probably a little different to Saturday and probably Friday, and they just saw one or two riders get cut out. The amount of saves they caught on camera were brilliant, just shows the level that they're at because they were really pushing. And we did mention Vietti, I think 4 saves I can remember. He was on his limits today.
Yeah, he was good today. It's nice to see him back because obviously he had a pretty rough patch. Obviously won the race in Austria, kind of a bit missing again in Catalonia. I think he ended up about 11th or 10th, so actually wasn't too bad. But he was missing most of the weekend. But yeah, it's nice to see him back this weekend as well. We may as well move on to MotoGP now. Of course, we've got the sprint and the main race to talk about, so there's always plenty of action. But a man who was can't speak. A man who was sublime this weekend, Jorge Martin, a pole position, sprint win, main race win, whilst his rivals are a bit injured. He's got to try and make the most of it, and he absolutely did. A perfect weekend from Martin. I don't think I saw a single mistake from the guy all weekend. Just phenomenal, and he's brought our championship lead down by a decent amount this weekend.
Yeah, new outright lap record too, which was it was ridiculous.
Very impressive.
He went so far under it. It was ridiculous when he crossed the line in qualifying. I was like, oh my god, that lap time is immense. So it was just one of those weekends. I think Jorge Martin is kind of prone to these weekends where he'll get on the bike and when in the first laps in FP1 you go, alright, this fella's having a good weekend. And it was just one of those weekends. It just, everything clicked. He's now comfortably in second over Bezzecchi, and he's took a good chunk of points out of Bagnaia. Now, whether he'll be able to do it when Bagnaia's fit, I don't know. But you can't say anything against his weekend. This weekend, he was just perfect. Did everything right. Even an injured Bezzecchi and Bagnaia at home. Again, we talk about how much the VR46 group go there probably every second weekend. They know every inch of that track to beat them there, no matter how fit they are, is an immense job. So again, just hats off to him, and let's hope that he can continue it because it'd be nice to get a title fight, because basically the whole Barcelona weekend and then this weekend has brought the championship back on. Like, he's gained back 12, 26, 27 points from my maths, so that's over a full race win. So like the
16 in the main race of Catalonia alone, didn't he? So yeah.
It's just, if he can keep going, I think he has sensed that, right, well, Pecco crashed out of Barcelona, took points off him there, beat him twice this weekend. If he can, I wouldn't put it past him being good again in the sprint races. He seems quite good over the short distance sprint races. He seems, probably the longer races is where he struggles more. I think Pecco over a full race distance is nearly untouchable, to be honest. So I think today it was a good result for Martin to get that many points over him, and the fact Bezzecchi split the two of them as well, just took another 4 points off him or whatever. So it's going to be tough to kind of go back against the factory team, especially now that we've a weekend off for Pecco. You'd imagine he'll be fit-ish going to India, and everyone's kind of back to normal. Then you'd imagine Bezzecchi's hand will be somewhat okay as well. So then it is kind of a bit more of a normal run-in. There's no one missing races, and I think everyone then will be on a similar level in terms of fitness. So again, this weekend he was immense. That lap record was sublime in Q2. That was just a dream to watch. And then again, sprint race, untouchable. Was questionable in the full race. I thought Pecco held on to him for longer than I thought he would. but then he got about a second and he just absolutely checked out, and from there then he was prime Lorenzo. No one was catching him, so in fairness, can't really say anything against this weekend. It was just perfect, and I hope to see him continue at decent form because we need a good run in the championship.
We certainly do. We do need a bit of a battle. We can't let Bagnaia have it all his own way and run away. So, yeah, hopefully Martin can continue to take it with to him. But, yeah, I mean, Martin qualifying, he's always been pretty good at it. This year, he actually has struggled quite a bit with it, but he does have these sessions where he just pulls that half second on the whole field, and you do just question how he's done it. But, yeah, he really is a special talent, and obviously kind of that in the sprint race, really, he just went immediately and pulled away. Did obviously learn from it in the main race, so I don't think it quite worked, but I think then he probably just circulated at a decent pace, and then as he started to drop them a little bit, he then dropped the hammer and really went, so it allowed him to pull away from Bagnaia behind. But Bagnaia, he did have a very good weekend himself. I mean, front row, 2 third places after, let's be honest, when we saw his legs get run over in Catalonia, I was thinking that he was going to be out for a few rounds at least. So the fact that he was, obviously, he escaped any breakages, but he clearly has obviously still picked up a lot of bruising that's very, very sore and very painful for him. And maybe there is a small break somewhere under there. We know there was potentially an old injury that they could see. Maybe there is something a little bit we don't know 100%, but it does seem like there wasn't any actual breaks. But even still, you could see from Friday morning, from Thursday, you could see how much pain he was in. Obviously, then on Friday, they were using the ride-height device to let it lower him off the bike. After the race today, he couldn't even get off the bike himself. He had one of the mechanics had to sort of lift his leg over for him. He was just destroyed. He sat there for a good 2 minutes before getting off the bike, and it clearly took it all out of him. And he did do a fantastic job because MotoGP is so competitive these days. If you're not quite on it, you're last. And he did do a fantastic job. And we've said this many times at previous weekends, even though, of course, he's lost championship points on the podium in both races. Good damage limitation and very impressive considering the injuries he's carrying at the moment.
Yeah, I can't say anything but superlatives for Bagnaia, really. Walking to the bike seemed okay. Getting off the bike was a lot harder. I saw him walking around the paddock or the pit lane after warm-up, and he seemed quite well. Now, you'd imagine if anyone's had any sort of injury in a bike or a car accident or anything, using the part of your body that's been injured, you're really easily fatigued. So you think, if you look at Marquez, he's a perfect example of how he limited his weekends. He'd kind of do what he could in FP1, get a good feeling and get an understanding. Do only a certain amount in FP2. Wouldn't go mad in FP3 Saturday morning. Would push as hard as he could in qualifying on a Saturday, and then limit his lap times in morning warm-up as well. He's some race weekends last year, Marquez, when he wasn't fully fit, didn't even go to morning warm-up. He just didn't bother. He just saved himself for the race. And we just saw Pecco this weekend. Now, obviously, he wasn't no broken bones or torn muscles or any ligament damage, but he seemed to get better as the race weekend went on, and he seemed quite well in terms of movability, and just he was quite loose this morning after warm-up. So it was an interesting dynamic, because usually what Sylvain Cantoli was saying is you get up morning warm-up, you wouldn't have any painkillers, any drugs in your system, so usually you'd feel pretty second-hand after even a 10-20 minute session there. And he said then you kind of drug yourself up for the race, and then when you get to half race distance, you're kind of, well, I'm actually not feeling too bad. And it's kind of the mental psychology kind of trick on yourself, where you trick yourself into thinking that, oh, I feel quite well after feeling so bad after 4 laps in morning warm-up. So the fact he seemed quite well after walking around talking to Bezzecchi, it was a good promising fact, but he said he was finished after half race distance. And in terms of his race, it was pretty obvious. Bezzecchi passed him, then Bezzecchi ran on a corner later, and then again Bezzecchi passed him a couple of laps later. And at that point then he did everything he could just to keep third, and to be honest, the fact that he managed to hold off a really, really quick Pedrosa kind of said everything. He was just kind of, today he was prime Dovizioso. He just goes, right, I can brake here, you're not going to pass me. If you are, you're going to go wide. I don't need to be quick anywhere else. I'll brake late where I don't need to be passed, or where it could be passed. And that's what he did. He rode the bike like Davi in 2017 and 18, and just made sure, I'm not going to get beaten here. Pedrosa's going to have to come up with something special if he's going to take this podium. And leave it at that. Even if he did finish fourth, it wouldn't have been the end of the world. I think, was there 3 points for difference? 3 or 4, I think. So
I think so. I think it's like 12 for fourth. So
yeah. So again, even if Pecco did lose the podium, it wouldn't have been a disaster. I think if someone offered him fourth before the race, he probably would have taken it. But the fact, 2 podiums, a good qualifying session, there's nothing else you could ask for after such a horrible crash in Catalonia. Really, it was almost as impressive as Martin in terms of just how he managed his whole race weekend.
Yeah, I would say so. I think he wasn't getting any more out of that, and I think great damage limitation considering also the injuries he is carrying. I didn't actually see him after warm up, but that is quite interesting that he was walking around quite well because, like you say, usually you have your painkillers. You have the most painkillers on the Sunday, and you have them right before the race. So, yeah, it was interesting to hear that one. But of course, you did mention there that during the race, in fact, both races, the sprint and the main race, Bagnaia had to defend from Dani Pedrosa. Of course, one of the best riders I've ever seen in MotoGP. And when he's made his wildcard appearances, it's always been fantastic. The one he made, was it 21? Wasn't actually amazing in Austria. Didn't end up too good for him because he ended up crashing, didn't he? And the bike got hit and it blew up. But his pace was not too bad there. But this season, the 2 wildcards he's been unbelievable. He was so fast in Jerez. Kind of the races didn't go his way. He kind of got a bit beat up. And clearly he learnt from that in these races because he was so fast all weekend from Friday. Qualified really, really well. 5th place on the grid. That's fantastic. Again, for a rider that was saying he's been retired since 2018, it's ridiculous. I know, of course, he had a test at the circuit before, and of course he does test with the KTM a lot, but there is just not being race fit like those guys. Like, I don't mean his actual fitness, but I mean the actual race sharpness and knowing the weekend and having your structure to it. It's such a massive thing. So the fact that he can walk into MotoGP these days with how competitive it is, puts it 5th place on the grid, 2 4th places, could have been a podium in both those races. I was willing him on for a podium because what a story that would have been. But even still, he should be proud because he destroyed the rest of the KTMs. All right, Binder was probably quicker than him in the sprint, but just kind of caught up to him too late. And I think you could tell, obviously, he wanted to be respectful with Pedrosa, with him being a teammate. And obviously, in the main race, he was ahead of Pedrosa until he fell off. But Miller, Augusto Fernandez, Pol Espargaro, he was miles clear of those guys this weekend. And in qualifying, he's clear of all of them, even Binder. So Pedrosa, I know, of course, he has some slightly different parts on his bike, but he just showed how good he was. And it's such a shame that he retired when he did. Obviously, just got beat up so much by the Honda. The development had gone way away from him. I really would have loved to have seen him on a Petronas Yamaha, but of course that wouldn't have given us Fabio Quartararo. So these things, they work out for a reason. But it's so good to see Danny back every time, and his performance was just amazing. He's still such a talented rider. I'm still devastated for him that he never won a world championship because he definitely deserved it. He really, really did.
I think his talent was in the wrong era because I feel like the late 2000s when he had Rossi, Stoner and Lorenzo, I think he would have always had a tough chance of winning against them, and it would have been a weird season, kind of like 2012 where Lorenzo wasn't the outright quickest, Stoner was, but Stoner gets injured, and then Danny has a good run of form, but then unfortunately at this track it kind of Hector Barber wipes him out, and he has an issue on the grid that day and gets pushed to the back of the grid, and that kind of was a championship. And then it was just a little shame, really. And then through the Marquez years, you just think Marquez has him, and in the end he did, really. And it was just a shame that you think if you put Danny Pedrosa on the grid in 2020, I would have tipped him for the championship on KTM.
Yeah,
it's just he suits that bike so well. His riding style, I've always been a fan of Danny's.
He developed it.
His riding style, I've always been a fan because just the way
it's just so good, isn't it?
It's such a modern style, even though he raced 15 years ago at this rate. Yeah, 2000 when he came up in 2006, so almost 20 years ago at this rate. Just the way he's so far forward on the bike and he's so small and he gets the bike up onto the fat part of the tire. I really miss watching him. A lot of the modern riders aren't as like. You look at some riders, you go, Jorge Martin, amazing the way he hangs off it, but a lot of riders just don't have anything special about their riding style. I think Danny was one of those ones where he just was so good on the bike. You could watch him all day, and again, any glimpse we got him today, he just looked so good on that bike. And it's a shame he's retired because I'd love to see him full-time back on a KTM. Now, at the age of 37, I think that window's probably gone. And maybe if KTM were where they were now. Back when he was like 34, you might think he'd take a chance at it, but I think he's retired long enough that he's probably just happy with these one-off races where you can still show that he's still got it. But
they've already got too many riders; they don't need another one.
That's exactly it. Like, I know KTM could have their own. They could have their own GP Red Bull rookies, where it's just a full field of KTM bikes. They have so many riders in reserve. Like, so it's a shame, really, the way his career ended, because he was 32 when he retired, which is no age really in the championship, to be honest. If you look at what Valentino did, Davi, Cal, they went a lot longer.
Lorenzo was kind of the same. Both of those two retired. Like,
again,
in fact, really, the three of the four of them, like Stoner, Lorenzo, and Pedrosa, are all retired too young. Really.
Yeah, realistically, they all retired as well, probably within, like, in terms of age, about a year of each other, because they were all about 30 to 32. I think Lorenzo's 32, Pedrosa 32. I think Stoner just hit 30 in Phillip Island before he retired, which was probably about a month before the end of the season. So it was just, or no, I think actually, never mind. I think I'm getting Pedrosa. I think Stoner was only 29.
Yeah, I was going to say Stoner was quite young,
because he
must have been a similar age, because they all came through together, the three of them, really.
Stoner's championship winning year was 2011. On his birthday, he won in his home race. He turned 27, so he would have been 28, 29 when he retired. So slightly younger, like, but late 20s, early 30s, ballpark. Yeah, exactly. So there's just not enough time for me for poor Pecco or poor Pedrosa. I could watch him. I really wish he came back. No, I know I'm not going to get it, but he's just he's so good. Now, it does raise one question, right? And I haven't asked this, and I didn't put it into notes because I wanted to just kind of spring it on you. Do you reckon the Pedrosa Rossi era, the riders were better than they are now? A lot of people have imposed that question because he's come back onto a competitive bike, of course, but he's done so well against the field. People are thinking, are these guys from 10 years ago that much better? Or do you reckon it's all nonsense?
It's difficult because it's been talked about quite a bit this weekend, hasn't it? And the TNT commentators were talking about it, and they were saying no, they don't think so. But because they're like, it just shows how good that Pedrosa is. But then that point doesn't really make any sense, because, like, if you're saying that it's just showing how good Pedrosa is, but then that's the point. It's like how good Rossi, Lorenzo, Pedrosa, Stoner were. Now, I'd say on average, the riders are much better now than they were back then. You used to get riders that weren't that great, especially on these sort of back teams where they're paying to be there. I mean, you know, you go maybe not so much in the late 2010, the 2000s, but definitely if you go a bit further back, there certainly was some riders that definitely out of their depth in MotoGP that were sort of there because they paid to be there. So I think on an average, all the riders are very good these days. If you put them into that era on a decent package, they are the rider that's miles clear of the satellite bikes, but still decent bit behind the Rossi, Lorenzo riders. Like, they're probably finished. They're like your Bautista of the day, almost, right? Like, occasionally gets a podium, does pretty well most of the times, top 5. You know, it's always in the sort of top 10. I mean, you were pretty much guaranteed that if you're on a factory bar by then, but you know what I mean? That's how I kind of gauge the riders. I'd say the riders these days are much better on average, but I don't think any of the riders on the grid, obviously aside Marquez, are really that level. Quartararo, I would say, I don't know, because he has pulled some stunning performances out on the Yamaha, but then you look at what Marquez does, he's probably a bit higher up than Quartararo most weekends, and his bike is probably... Well, actually, I don't know if his bike is worse. I think you can get more out of the Honda if you can get more out of it, if that makes any sense. Like, the Honda peak lap time is much better than the Yamaha peak lap time. It's just harder to get to. I think that's maybe the problem with Quartararo. But yeah, I would say that, like, those 4 guys probably are better. But then the reason why they were like the aliens was because they're like the best riders we've ever seen. So I don't think, again, it's a slight necessarily on the other riders. There's not a dominant force at the moment to kind of put a label on it so much. I mean, I think... I know I'm going on a little bit here, so I do apologise. But I think we talk about Marquez a lot, right? We're saying if he's on a better bike. I think we're pretty much all in agreement. If he was on the same bike as Bagnaia, he wouldn't be in the same postcode as Bagnaia. He would be winning every race. So I think it does show that the riders are not as good as, like, the alien standout riders, but then that's not to say the riders were better back then, because I don't think they were, aside from the exceptions. So basically, to sum up my point, as an average, I think the riders are better these days, but the peak riders that we have now are not as good as the peak riders we had then, just by chance, not because of an era thing. It's just the fact that we had Rossi, who was amazing, Stoner, who was amazing, Pedrosa, who was amazing, Lorenzo was amazing, Marquez sort of was at the tail end. I know he missed Stoner, but we had quite a lot of races that were sort of Rossi, Lorenzo, Marquez, Pedrosa kind of battles. So yeah, I think those riders are just the next level, and I think we're going to see people like Acosta be like that. I think Acosta has the potential to be as good as somebody like Marquez, like Rossi, like Lorenzo, and it just takes that long to come through. I think the problem is just because they all disappeared at once, it makes it feel as if there's not been anybody for a while. That's probably why. So yeah, that's pretty. I'll put that same question to you, actually, but to try and not go on for too much longer.
I know,
that's
yeah.
my thought.
I probably should have thought of my answer when I was listening to you, but I thought it's quite hard to answer, because if you go back to 2009, exactly, there's so many different things. The current bikes, the current grid from factory Ducati to satellite Aprilia, we'll say, they're the closest they've ever been. So the equipment is 100%. Closer. If you went back to 2008, what Valentino's on compared to...
Well, Valentino was on compared to what Colin Edwards was on, even.
Yeah, exactly. In the same team, or in the same manufacturer. Like, the difference between factory and satellite back then was noticeable. Like, if you put Rossi on Edwards' bike and then switch it around, there would have been a big chunk of time. It wouldn't have been like Rossi still would have walked it. It would have made a big difference because of how much, like, 10, 15 years ago, you started the season with a bike, and by the end of the season, the factory bike was completely different, and you got the odd swing arm and the odd here and there, a few little bits of sprinkles of this and that. Whereas,
if you were like amazing, if you were like factory contracted, like
exactly.
If you like somehow won a wet race or like put on the podium when like Stoner had fell off or something like you.
Like, you need to remember as well, 2008, the whole world was in a kind of a world crisis in terms of recession, so manufacturers weren't just throwing everyone a brand new swing arm every week in case it didn't work. They were giving Rossi everything. Lorenzo was getting almost as much as Rossi. Edwards was getting whatever Lorenzo didn't want. And the kind of saying goes for all the other manufacturers that...
Tosland just said, here's your bike.
Exactly. We'll put your number on this bike and you can ride it whenever we think you're ready. But yeah, so the equipment straight away is much more competitive. So that's why we don't have a Rossi winning by 32 seconds at a Mugello or whatever, just an example of a standout rider winning by a massive margin. Even if you go back, right, watch 2015 Valencia. Look at Rossi's bike, what he does to every other bike around him off the line. It just was a clear disadvantage. And that was not even 10 years ago. And if you went back 10 years before that to kind of 2005-ish, geez, the factory bikes versus the satellite back then, they were different class altogether. Like they did no intention of being on track together. So like 2015 isn't a million years ago. Like that's still,
it was like the last year before all these concession things.
Exactly.
So I guess it's probably the best year you could pick for that, actually, to be fair.
So you could just see the power of his bike compared to all the other potentially equal bikes around him. He was made up 6-7 positions into turn one, and Valencia doesn't have a long, it's not like a Mugello where you could power it down. So it was clear that just back then they had so much better electronics. They had all the engineers, so just the better teams were just better in every aspect. Whereas now everything's so much closer, so the rider doesn't make as much as a difference in the screen as we think. The top riders still get the last 1%. The Pecco still gets more out of it than Bezzecchi, Martin, Alex Marquez and Luca. He is still making that difference. Now, if we put him back into Valentino's era, maybe he's winning each race by 15 seconds and we're going, oh my god, this guy's as good as Stoner. I think on the counter argument, I still think Rossi, Stoner, Marquez, Lorenzo are all better than Pecco is, and Brad Binder. I'm a huge Brad Binder fan as well. I bang on about him every week, every chance I get. He is my current probably favourite rider in the world, bar Johnny Ray. And obviously we still have Marquez towards the latter part of his career, and he has his injuries and everything going on. I think if you give Marquez some sort of equal equipment, he still wins races. Now, I still think he isn't going to be 2019 Marquez. I think he's going to be more of a 2015 Rossi, where he might win 5 races a year and probably podiums nearly everything else. I think he's really, really consistent and really close to the front. I think as a rider, he's just changed too much. The sport has changed too much that he can't really do it. And I think even his talent, I still just don't think you can. There's not enough talent in anyone to ride around the issues with the front tyre that Michelin have, to ride in the pack. Every rider struggles with that. I don't think back then we had as much issues with all these stupid gizmos. So I just think the current sport is more tricky, and it makes it so that not every week the same people can't outperform everyone by the distance. So again, I've rambled on probably as long as you have. So the answer is yes and no. I think the peak riders at the time are better. I just think the class currently is closer together, so it makes it look like when a star comes back, Pedro or Pedrosa, he comes back and makes it. And again, he does come onto a track he's already tested on previously on a bike we know that is going well this season. So again, there's no answer to this. You cannot answer yes or no. Like I said, I still think the likes of Stoner, Lorenzo, Marquez, and Rossi and Pedrosa, them 5 are better than the top 5 in the championship currently. Like, Aleix Espargaro is no match for Lorenzo or Rossi or Marquez or Stoner. He's just not on that
we've
level.
We've seen Aleix Espargaro race those guys. Like.
Exactly. We've seen like what a Valentino in his mid-30s did to Aleix. And now Aleix is top 3 rider in the championship, top 4 maybe. We've seen Marquez just drive Vinales for years. Rossi, again, towards the end of his career, was equal to Vinales on equal equipment. So I think, again, the previous generation was a golden generation. And I think we're probably going to get another couple of years of the current field. And then we'll have David Alonso, we'll have Pedro Costa, there's just maybe Jose Rueda. There's just a lot of riders coming through at the moment that you just want to know which ones are going to make it, because there was plenty of riders coming through when Stoner came through, when Valentino came through, and when Lorenzo. They didn't all make it. The likes of Pedrosa and Davi still made it to the top, but there was plenty of riders around his level that never really kicked on to be what they ended out to be in terms of their rivals. So there's always going to be the question of, is Valentino better than McDoon? Is McDoon better than Kevin Schwantz?
Yes.
Go back and back and back and back and back. You can just go back all these years. There's always going to be the argument of Michael Halewood versus Marquez, who's better, Agostini versus Rossi. It's hard to take different generations and put them against each other. So I think...
Yeah, it's difficult. I
still think the riders, though, as I've said it like 6 times already, the riders are better at the classic low, so that's going to end at that point.
Yeah, I think we're both firmly sitting on the fence there.
100%.
But yeah, I think we're both kind of got a similar opinion that the riders are better on average than they were before, but the top riders are perhaps not as good. But it is difficult to say, because I think you're right. It's so technical now. I think you make a point with the gizmos. Like, if you were in 2015, Marquez can push the front. He can stop the front from crashing himself, so he can therefore just brake later and carry more speed than Pedrosa could, or like somebody else on the same bike, like the Cal Crutchlow on the satellite Honda, for example. Just because he was a better rider, he could do that. Whereas now, the front tire is basically full of pressure and about to explode. You can't force that, but you can't force that any further because the tires won't let you. So yeah, I think there is that element of it, that the technical kind of holds them back almost, I think.
Yeah, just 1 point before we move on as well. I think the current bikes are easier to ride than they've ever been with the ride height devices and the aero. I think the fact that they're going so much quicker and they're kind of going above the tires kind of level. I think, I'm not saying they're easy. I'm not saying I could jump on and match Marquez on the Honda at the moment, but in 2013 to 2019, Marquez was making a difference. It wasn't that the Honda was better than Yamaha or the Ducati was worse than whatever. There was differences in each bike. They had their strength or weakness. But Marquez was the one that was able to extract 1% more than Pedrosa in that corner, or was able to do something that Pedrosa couldn't match week in, week out, and that's what won him all his championships. It wasn't that the Honda had an amazing this and that and whatever, and I think currently we're seeing Pecco making use of all of Ducati's toys on that bike. I think we're seeing Marquez, we all agree, I think there's nobody out there that thinks Marquez isn't as good as Pecco, if not better. So we're just seeing a bit of an F.
Pecco would admit that.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think anyone on the grid...
If I had to think he has, like before. So
yeah, I think there was an interview, or not an interview, but Neil Hodgson was saying he was sitting down with, was it Lowe's in January? And he said, the both of them, right, so who's the best rider in the world? And they both said straight out Mark Marquez, like without hesitation. Everybody knows what he's done. We've seen what he did when he came back to start season, taking pole on that Honda. We still know, like, there's just glimpses of just what he is. We're just not seeing enough of it because of Honda, obviously, the crashes throughout the season, bad injuries. So he's just not willing to show us them moments because there's just too much risk behind him. So
he was very good today as well, actually. Very good.
Got a great result out of a package that didn't deserve, and I think he's slowly changing into less high peaks and low downs, into the point where he's like, again, I probably shouldn't compare Marquez to Rossi, but he's kind of like the 2014-15 Rossi, where it's like, the limit is there, I'm about half a step back, this is the most I can get out of the bike today, that's what I'll take. And I think P7, 6, let me look. I've scrolled all the way down to the end of the championship.
He came out in 8th.
He finished, it was 3 points, so that would be, I don't know, 9 points. So yeah, about 8 or 9 today for it. So again, solid top 10, and like, look what the rest of the Hondas were. Mir crashed again, so it's just, I think,
and let's talk about the elephant in the room. One of the Hondas didn't qualify this weekend.
Yeah, that's for Honda, that's disgraceful, because the Japanese rider showing up at Misano's, it's not a new track. I
think that shows why their bike's bad. If your rider can't get within the time, like the time to qualify, then you're not going to be. The testing's pointless. It's not relevant
100%.
information.
Yeah, it's like
surely you're barely activating the tires like that.
100%. Like if you're not in within 1.5 seconds at the top times, you're not doing enough to be knowing what the bike will feel like, what Marcus is doing, and what Rins was doing at the start of the season. So again, if he can't get any more out of it, and like you'd imagine, surely if he could have done the lap time, he would have, because he needs to progress through the weekend.
You only need to do one lap over the whole weekend.
Exactly.
You only have to do it within one of the practice sessions. So if it was there, even with a toe, he'd have got it. It just wasn't there.
It just shows how maybe they're on test riders. Just a bit of everything with Honda, like we've heard throughout the weekend.
I mean, like, even we had riders like Watanabe with the Sheik Misano last year step in for Mir. He managed to qualify. He got lapped, but he managed to qualify. And Ponson's remembered. Again, Misano. Why is it always Misano? I don't know, but they get these random people in. Yeah. But again, he qualified. So, and that was back in the day when the equipment wasn't so. Like he was on like a 3-year-old Decay. So
yeah, it just shows that current Honda are missing. They're behind every aspect. Every corner of the operation is
not just the bike.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, I think we've probably spent plenty of time on that one. I think it's good to talk about that kind of stuff. And again, maybe that's a topic for another podcast, talking about some of the classic stuff and the way things are going, and comparing riders, maybe, because we know people get quite passionate about that. So maybe that's something we could do at some point. But we'll return to this weekend, and Jack Miller, a rider who had another awful weekend, and a weekend in which we had some strange rumours going into the weekend that he'd been offered double his salary for 10 wildcards and a test rider role for next year. Apparently, it seems that that's a false rumour, according to Jack, although I suppose it would be one of those things that you would deny anyway. But his performance this weekend certainly didn't help him keep his ride, because it does seem like now that perhaps they're trying to push Acosta towards the factory team, because they've already kind of promised Paul and Augusto that they're going to keep their rides. So yeah, it seems like maybe Miller all of a sudden is kind of under threat, and the way he's performing, it's kind of given them a reason to get rid of him also.
The issue with Miller, right, and it's his issue at the moment is himself. I'll explain in a second. At the end of last year, he wins in Japan. We knew at that point he's going to KTM, and everyone's thinking, oh great, Jack's won his last race. Now that still might be his last race win. But when he announced he was leaving Ducati were disappointed, because they really enjoyed him and they loved him and the great relationship, and he was good to them and they were good to him. But we all thought, oh, he's going to be pretty average on the KTM. If like top 12 rider probably on the KTM, he'd be definitely second best to Brad week in, week out. Testing looked the same, kind of followed everything we thought. Gets to the first round, they've found something towards the end. KTM love Jack. They have done since he rode for him in Moto 3 back in 14. 14, 15, 14?
Yeah, it was 14. Yeah.
So,
yeah, Alex Marquez won.
Exactly. So they've always had a great relationship. They came in from when he was with Pramac, but I think he ended up going to the factory Ducati team. They've basically wanted him on their KTM for a couple of years now. They've always wanted to get him back.
After him for a while.
So when he went to KTM, it wasn't a big surprise. But then he's developed a bike in a way that taken some of the Ducati knowledge, brought it over. This year, KTM have been the most competitive they've ever been. Obviously, they've won races in 20 and other races throughout. I think they didn't win 19, they won 20, 21, and this year.
Yeah, they've won races for the last few years. They won a couple in 20. Oliveira won a few, didn't he, in 21 and 22? But
yeah. So they've always had the high points of the season, but this year definitely has been the most, where they've been more of a full.
They're there week in, week out.
Exactly.
Now, whereas they'd have the odd race where they'd win and then be nowhere.
So I think some of that is down to Jack. Obviously, the whole Red Bull money and the fact they're using some of Red Bull Racing's aero department. We're seeing results of that this year. But then Jack had a great start to the season. I got back to Jack after a few minutes, but he just had such a good start to the season. He seemed really good on the bike. He seemed confident. Everything was going his way until about Le Mans. Jerez, amazing. Battled for podiums, both races, was really quick. That's back when they had a massive advantage off the launch and they were just getting 1-2 straight away. And it just looked like he was going to be a good top 5 man for the championship. Currently, he is sitting in the championship P10. Pretty poor, really, overall, considering the way his start of his season was. For example, he's 19 points ahead of Fabio Quartararo, and Quartararo's season has been...
That says it all, right?
Absolute abysmal. Like, Quartararo's season has been...
I'm quite impressed with Fabio Quartararo.
So, he's just... And again, right, so back to the middle point that he's had such a good start season. We get to Le Mans, he crashes in... Does he crash out of boat? He crashed in the sprint, and then I think he crashes later.
He definitely crashed in the main race because he dropped back and got passed by like Augusto. Even although Augusto finished fourth, didn't he? But he got passed by every KTM and then fell off. Aside from Folger, I guess. But.
I have a feeling. Let me look at the. Yeah, Le Mans, he didn't score a single point, so I'm going to guess he crashed in both because I do remember him crashing in the sprint. He definitely crashed
in the main race. If he crashed in the sprint, then he crashed in both.
I feel like in this. Where did he crash in the main race? The museum? Because he crashed in the sprint there, I believe.
I think he crashed at the chicane.
Well, so I reckon. Yeah, no, I think so. Anyway, he poor weekend Le Mans
back and then crashed in the main race, definitely. So yeah.
So yeah, we're probably both in agreement that
either way, he scored no points, whether he fell out of the points or fell
exactly,
off. It's no different at the end of the day.
A no score at Le Mans on a KTM isn't good enough regardless. And just looking at his results since, he's been quick in occasion. He's done the odd qualifying lap. He's always been a rider that can not hold his breath, but he's been very good over one lap. He's had that in every class, and that's always been his strong point. We've always thought that he's a great man for putting a lap together. If it's mixed conditions, he's great. If it's a cold track and there's a few spots of rain, he's great.
Just a style, just to go 100%, isn't it?
Exactly. He can activate the tires, but also like his strength is also his biggest weakness when it comes to full 28 lap race. He just doesn't seem to manage the tires throughout the race. At the moment, it seems more of a setting issue because he keeps coming out saying that we're kind of going in circles with the setup. He just doesn't feel comfortable with the bike at the moment. And we're seeing, like we talked about throughout the whole podcast, if you're 1% off in GP, you're nowhere in regards to how good you are or how quick your bike is or anything. He's just struggling slightly, and that's just enough to be kind of nowhere. And again, he's outperformed everyone's expectations at the start of the season, and now we're thinking, why isn't Miller P4 every week like he was in Portimao at the start of the season? So that's just kind of his issue. He's currently finishing, well, obviously this weekend didn't really get a finish, but he's currently finishing most race weekends where he probably would have been put by a lot of people at the end of last year. So I just feel with the Miller thing is he's slightly overperformed. Now we expect it from him, and now we think we're underperforming, where it's probably just current Ducatis, the newer Ducatis, probably have gotten themselves a bit dialed in after.
He did qualify 18th though this week. I don't think we expect him to be that bad.
Nah, that is a bit much because Misano is a very high grip track, and usually if the grip is high, he can just pull the lap out of it. The fact that Pedrosa was in the top 5, Brinder was in Q2.
It's usually one of his better tracks as well. Like it's one of the tracks where he could usually run with Bagnaia a little.
It's just a mystery really why he's kind of gone that far, because I never really expected him to be in the championship hunt. I didn't expect him to keep it up like Binder. I did expect as the season went on and that maybe the current bike got dialed in more, that the gap would just go a touch between the two. But the fact he's that far off him now, and was taken out today by Pero. I believe it looked from the incident that Pero went for pass,
it
lost
looked
the
like
front.
that.
So
Still not seen it though, so not actually.
exactly, there's quite a few crashes there that we haven't really got footage back for. Which
TV
is
coverage wasn't great actually.
Yeah, it's the same in Superbikes as well. Like a lot of the incidents weren't picked up.
I think they should just have onboard cameras for every bike. I don't really know why they don't.
I think they do. I just don't think they have it set up so live feed can get it as easily as.
They don't always have them because I think sometimes you have like a weight in the place of them. But they only have so many that can broadcast. Like
surely though, for the reverse direction, you should have to have like the cockpit camera.
It's like Vinales didn't have any cameras at Catalunya. You could see there wasn't a rear or front camera on the bike.
Interesting. I think, it probably should be just kind of the rules that every rider has a front and rear camera, and that kind of cleans up everything, because it's hard when there's 25 bikes gone past for one cameraman to pick up every incident. You can't keep an eye on all of them at the one time, like they are moving so quick. So, but just another poor weekend for Miller. Some of the flyaways, I reckon he'll bounce back. I think we'll probably get some weather. I am reckoning that some of the flyaways will be wet, so I'd imagine see him back there, and he's always been good. Remember back to Silverstone 15 in the West where he took out Cal. Was that 15? Was that 14? That was 14.
It was 15.
15. Yeah, he was on the LCR back then.
14, he was still in it.
Yeah. Again, I just realised I said that. he was doing a double race that weekend.
He did a good job to take out a Crutchlow in Moto 3.
Although
Crutchlow on that Ducati at some points may as well have been in Moto 3. Yeah.
Poor boy. But he's always shown pace in the way. I think there's any questionable thing going on over the weekend. Jack's lack of caring about tyres seems to bring him back towards the front, but then when you have a normal race weekend where the grip is high, everybody's dialed in on track, Jack does suffer, and I think this weekend was exceptionally bad for him, but I do expect to see him somewhat close to the front. I'd imagine when we go to Phillip Island, he's going to have a good weekend. I think he showed pace there last year. He got on podium there in 19?
Yeah.
Last year, the Pramac, I think. So,
he had the special livery.
Yeah.
I think it was one of Bagnaia. It was like P4. It was strange.
Yeah, weird weekend.
One of his good results. Yeah.
But it was just a bit of a wayward moment at the moment for Jack. I think he's having. I think Ruby's about to give birth at the moment, so I think he will be a father by the time he gets to India. So
he was going straight home from the race, I think.
So you never know. Remember having to Crutchlow after Willow was born, he started winning races. So maybe the same thing happens with Jack. You never know.
Yep, potentially. So that kind of is Miller's sort of saga at the moment. Obviously, like we said, is up in the air. Maybe he could potentially lose his ride. He's just kind of needs to try and get out of the rut he's in. I think we can definitely agree with that. But we've got Marc Marquez as well, another rider who is in an interesting situation at the moment. Obviously, we've heard a lot of rumours lately. Obviously, we had previously sort of been told that he was waiting till tomorrow where they have a test to test the new Honda, see how good it is, and then decide whether there's actually potential there and to decide whether he's going to leave. But then it sounded like going into this weekend that he'd basically signed for Gresini Ducati, and that it was basically just maybe the last little bits needed to be done before, like, basically it's ready to be announced. So it sounded like he was leaving. Then it was, actually there's a lot of wranglings going on behind the scenes. Don't know if the deal's going to happen. Then there was a rumour that he was buying the team completely and it's just going to have like Marquez Racing with both the Marquez brothers. And then it seemed like, maybe now Honda are trying to poach some good engineers to keep him. So we've kind of gone through all of the stages of the saga this weekend. It's been very, very bizarre. That's kind of the little summary of it. What do you think he's going to do?
You also forgot as well that at one point he was taking Red Bull and Repsol and Australia sponsor over to Gresini.
That was part of the buying thing.
I've never had a weekend where Friday was. I don't know if I can't. It's been such a long weekend with Mark now. I can't even remember. But Dutch out Sportlet, basically like it's a done deal. He has signed. He put out a video on Twitter, probably on all his social medias on Friday of him saying things are happening in Spain and just in Spanish. Sorry, and it's a video of him kind of like laughing and joking in the paddock. And then followed the rumours that he was signed, everything was done, that he was going to Gresini, he was done, he was out of his Honda contract. Then, next morning, it was like, unlikely because it doesn't look like everything can work out. It looked like there was some issues with contracts, whether it was beyond Gresini, Ducati, or in Honda, or just Marquez in general. So then it looked like it was off. Then we apparently were hearing that he had bought the team, which made no sense. And then apparently Repsol...
Yeah, I could see that happening. Like, I've kind of thought for a while that I could see him setting up his own team. So like
that wouldn't be, it's probably not a bad shout. Do the old MotoGP career mode where you just bang a bike up.
Yeah, there you go. He's in like MotoGP 23 career mode, like real life.
Exactly, yeah. It'd be strange, but anyway, he just... And then...
MM93 Riders Academy is going to start.
Exactly. It's crazy. And then, to be honest, when I heard that Estrella Galizia and Repsol and Red Bull will be pulling out of Honda and going with him, that's what I was like, I just don't see that. I think that's too much for it to happen. And then, at this moment in time, currently, it looks like he's kind of committed to Honda, because the rumour is now that they've gone to all the big teams and gone, how much I want you, Gigi Dell'Igna, and everyone in all... Basically, from what we've been told, is that Alberto Puig and Marc Marquez have gone to the big bosses at Honda, told them, we need to become more European, we need to go and sign all of... Basically, we need to sign the best engineers that we can get, and then maybe I'll stay, because they're trying to repay the faith that he's kept in Honda for being on their bike for so long, and all through the injury and stuff that he's stuck with them and stuff like that. So that's the latest rumour as of 8:30 Sunday night. When this podcast goes live Monday at about 9, he might be already signed for Gresini. All this might be irrelevant. We do apologise if it is, but we're going literally off of the current thing. So currently, it looks like he's somewhat committed to Honda. He's interested in trying the bike tomorrow, and that they're trying to get as many non-Honda and probably more European engineers in just to eradicate the project. Alberto Puig said today that Honda is changing radically for MotoGP, is kind of the headline to his interview.
This is where he signs for KRT tomorrow. In place of Johnny Ray, and we're all wrong.
That would be some surprise. Spanish team, though? You never know.
Yeah, they never know. Yeah.
Monster Energy. No, it won't happen. I can't see that.
That's the reason that won't happen. Repsol Kawasaki Racing and
Jesus.
Yeah, so we're not really sure what's going to happen because it changed every 5 minutes, but we just thought it was worth covering because the rumours just get more crazy. I love it. I can't wait to buy Valencia. It's like actually he's buying the whole championship so that he can add an extra team with KTMs.
Yeah, he's bought Carmelo out of his seat.
Yeah, he's bought Dorna. Yes, quite interesting. But we'll go back to reality a little bit more now, and someone that we wanted to give a bit of a shout out to actually was Raul Fernandez. Had a pretty good weekend. It's his best weekend probably in MotoGP so far at Misano. He was actually battling with Marc Marquez for most of the race, so quite sort of topical since we're talking about Marc Marquez. But the Aprilia has been pretty decent this season. Obviously, they've been a bit hit and miss sometimes, but you have seen some weekends where obviously you've had the two factory guys, and especially last weekend we had the two factory guys and Oliveira sort of right at the sharp end of the races, and we were kind of wondering where is Raul Fernandez, because he's not really shown any of his Moto 2 form, which was unbelievable back in that 2021 season where he almost won the championship as a rookie. His form in that season was unreal. And we've not seen that since he came to MotoGP. Obviously, last season he had a horrible season with the KTM Tech 3, just like his teammate Remy Gardner did. I don't think things were right from the beginning because he didn't really want to go up to MotoGP. He kind of got forced to. So I think they got off on the wrong foot from the very start. He got hurt very early on in the test as well, and I think that just was sour grapes immediately. It was never going to work. Obviously jumped onto Aprilia, was very happy and quite quick in testing, but then hasn't really shown much at all. But this weekend, he was pretty good throughout practice sessions. I think he went directly through to qualifying 2, if I'm not mistaken, which maybe it's not the first time he's done that, but it's definitely one of the first. I don't think
it's the first time he made it to Q2 end of.
Really?
2 years, yeah. I saw that stat yesterday.
Oh, okay. I thought he must have at least done it once, but earlier this season. But there you go then. So he made it to Q2 for the first time this season. I don't know where he qualified. I'm
12th.
not going to try. Oh, he did qualify 12th. Okay, well, even still, he made it into the session. That's the improvement. And then he finished 8th today?
Yeah, 8th place. 8 points for 8th place, yeah.
Yeah, so that's his new best finish in MotoGP, because I think his best finish was 10th up to that point. So some green shoots finally, and I'm happy to see it because he's been struggling. There has been some question marks over whether maybe he'd stay for next year. I think the team have been quite quick to say we're basically treating him as a rookie this season because how bad his last season was basically didn't exist. So they're trying to say they're going to keep him. And I think, yeah, I guess fair enough. But it is also a very good bike. It's the kind of bike that people would want to get onto. The Aprilia is very good, especially your more corner speed kind of riders like Quartararo, for example, would probably do quite well on an Aprilia. He probably wants to get out of his Yamaha contract. So, yeah, there's been some question marks, but it seems like Raul is staying, and I think happy to see that he had a good weekend, and hopefully he can try and carry the momentum into the next one.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was looking at the results. He's scored 4 points by the time he got to Saxony, which was a shame, really, because it's
quite poor when you've got 2 races a weekend as well.
If you look at the championship, he is the last of everyone that has done any somewhat part of the season.
With Di Antonio.
He is, yeah. Di Antonio is actually doing quite well. He's 43 points, whereas he's nearly double the points of Raul Fernandez. He had a good run through like the European runs where he's probably finishing 10th, 12th, which probably didn't notice because
that's true.
He's a run here of 6, 7, 4, 8, 2, 7 points. So again, they all add up. Whereas if you look at Fernandez's sheet, it's blank 2, blank 1, blank 1. Like there's just so many non-scores. And he to be fair, right, Fernandez has had his fair share of mechanical issues this year. He did retire last week from mechanical. I just feel like maybe the RNF team this year just haven't been on the ball 100%. Miguel Oliveira's had a tough season. Now, a lot of his has been bad luck, but he's had issues with
taken out.
Yeah, exactly. He's been targeted. I just feel like just maybe the first year of RNF on the Aprilia, I think it's just overall just been a bit rocky, and I think it's the perfect thing for Raul Fernandez that they've treated him as a rookie, because I'd imagine he's actually probably worse off than he would have been last year if he came onto this bike, because he had such a bad time last year. His confidence definitely wouldn't have been too high coming to Aprilia. Had such a bad relationship with KTM. He didn't want to go up. Then if he wanted, or if he did end up leaving, he wanted to go to Yamaha. That didn't materialise, was forced onto the second tier KTM. Injured himself in Thailand, and then they made him ride even though he was concussed. It was just a whole shit show of a situation for him, and he really just didn't get on well there. And a lot of people felt like he downed tools throughout the season and just stopped performing, but to be fair, he was never a million miles off of Remy, who kind of was having a similar season, and he had a big falling with the team. Remy. He did in the end, didn't he? I think to be honest, it felt like Fernandez was like downing tools through the start of the season. As the season went on, he got better, whereas Remy just got worse as it started getting into arguments with when it came to contracts and just the team, and they were saying he wasn't trying, and he was like, go screw yourselves, I'm putting everything on the line here week in, week out, and you're accusing me of not trying and all this. So it was, the whole team last year was just a mess. It's been brilliant since they've switched to gas because they've been so good to Paul Espargaro with his injury. Augusto was kind of pushed up. He probably didn't really, I know he's a Moto2 champ, but he was by no means an Acosta level of anticipation going into the class, and he's done way better than anyone has expected. Go back to his Le Mans race weekend, he was brilliant there, and he's shown pace many times this year. So if he's on the grid next year, I'd be quite happy to see him there. I think he's proven he probably deserves to be there. Again,
I think today was his first race finish outside the points. So like in a full race, I think.
As a rookie, that's
more I think I saw something like that. So
that's more than enough for a rookie, really, on a second tier KTM. Now, is he getting all the updates from KTM in terms of what Jack and Brad have been developing, and Danny? You just don't know exactly. It's always hard to tell what spec a bike a satellite team has, even though currently
they try and treat them. They always say they treat them the same, but there's a limit to the amount of parts you can make. Right? If you can make one, it's not going to gas, is it?
Exactly. So even if they treat them the same, they're still going to be delayed. There's still going to be delay getting the parts down the pipeline. But in fairness to going back to Raul, he's had a rough season, but he's been a rookie on a different bike again this year. Again, it's a new team in terms of a new team with a new manufacturer. There's been teething issues. I expect to see a step from next year going into next season. And I really applaud the RNF team for kind of treating him as, he's had such, they knew themselves he probably was a little broken as they came in. They took him under their wing and kind of rebuilt him as a rider. And this weekend he showed good pace and was ahead of Aleix for most of the weekend. and considering he won in
Yeah, and later was the last Aprilia today. So
yeah,
I
no,
think,
he had a big crash on Saturday, but you'd still expect him to not be behind the fourth tier rider in the Aprilia squad. So again, it just shows that there is steps being made. Now, it's not always easy to see when they're probably down, when they could be making steps from P18 to P16. We still see it as 0 points, but they're building, and I just hope that he has a good end to the season and good preseason, and then we might see something special next year from him and makes a step again, because it's he'll be going into his third year again, probably his second year with the team. You'd imagine same bike, same team for the first time in 4 years. It'll be a good kind of continuation. I think he might build on. I hope he can, because he was a mega talent in Moto 2 in his rookie year and probably deserved the title. But anyway, that's done and dusted.
Yeah, hopefully he can try and build on this the rest of the season. Like you say, maybe make that extra step into the next one. So we've got one last thing that we did want to talk about before ending this podcast, and it's actually sort of the situation with the Indian Grand Prix. So there's a week off now. We've got the test at Misano on Monday, but then the rest of that week is off. And the week after, they have got the inaugural Indian Grand Prix, although I don't know if they did maybe have a race like back in like the 50s there or something, but it's the modern era, so the first Indian Grand Prix. And it's interesting because the track is not actually homologated yet. Basically, they have to go around and view everything, make sure it's all safe and stuff. And this has been the problem with the Kimi Ring. That's why we never raced there. There was obviously other factors like the war that happened, which was it's like 2 countries away, so I don't really know why they use that as an excuse, but I think it was kind of a bit of a cop out to not go there. But the track was never homologated. Same things happened with Kazakhstan this year. But the Indian Grand Prix is a bit different because the track has existed for many years. It used to host Formula One racing back in the early 2010s, I think like 2011 to... It might have been, it was 2011, I think, to like 2013, and they had 3 races there.
3 races, and Vettel won them all.
Vettel won all of them. I think he led like every lap of them as well, something like that. Some ridiculous, some
Red
weird
Bull
stuff like that.
Back then.
Yeah, things don't change much, do they? But yeah, so they had the F1 races there. So the track was up to an international standard at that point. They have had some bike races there in the past, and they had the Asia Road Racing Series there 1 year. I think World Superbikes, were they meant to go in like 2014 and they got cancelled or something like that?
Yeah, so it was meant to be a Superbike track for one or 2 seasons, but again, what happened is it's a lot to do with the government. They just haven't put the money into it, and the track has kind of gone. It kind of just disappeared from everywhere, really, and it's a shame because it's a great track, but that was probably... There used to
be taxes. It was counted as entertainment rather than sport, wasn't it? And there was some really bad taxes on the track and things like that, and probably insurance and stuff. But either way, the track actually exists. But obviously, going from a car racing circuit, and also, like you say, it's not had the money in, so for a good 10 years, it's not had the investment. They needed to make some alterations. I don't think necessarily even to the track. Maybe... I think it was more outside of it, so like safety barriers and runoff areas and things like that. I think the actual circuit's pretty much the same, but they haven't been actually checked to see if those have been done and whether they're complete. So on Thursday, they're going with the riders. So the Thursday, the race weekend, but bear in mind they're going to be doing free practice the next day, is when they decide whether the track is safe, which is a bit last minute. Very, very last minute. Not something that's very usual, and usually means... But when they're leaving it that late, the race doesn't usually go ahead. So it will be interesting. Hopefully, the track is up to scratch and we get the race, because it'd be great to have a race in India. I think the track is quite good as well, actually, in fairness. So I'd be really looking forward to seeing that. And because everyone's going to go there, it would be a real shame and a real waste if they all went there and didn't race. But pass it over to you. What do you think about this whole situation? Because it's rather strange, and I feel like this is something that should have been done ahead of time. And I do think the Indian Grand Prix was rumoured to be initially for next year, but they sort of moved it forward. So maybe if they made a mistake with that one.
It's just overall a really, really odd situation, because fair enough, right? You think, right, so okay, fair enough, they go Thursday morning, and then they have the whole day to kind of get ready if the race is going ahead, if they're happy with the grandstand. One thing you didn't mention was there was a lot of grandstands put in, because over time it kind of just left to abandon. So a lot of the grandstands weren't up to kind of a grade A track, we'll say. So a lot of work has gone in with that. But what people don't realise is if we're going next weekend, just for argument's sake, to Aragon, The team trucks will arrive on Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, and we'll start to unload everything built. And by Thursday, pretty much the paddock will be ready to go. So by the time we get there on Thursday, we being the paddock, and they do their homologation and pass whether it's good or not, everyone will have to unload everything. Everything will be ready to go racing. So at that point, all the chefs, every truck will have unloaded. The bikes will be rebuilt. They'll be checked. There'll be everything going. All the tents will be up. All the garages will be built. There's so much work as to go ahead, right, throughout the week before we even get the homologation to know if we're going to go racing. For me, I don't like that because there's more reasons why I don't like it. But if by some reason we'll say the track doesn't pass and we're like, yeah, we've no race this weekend, all that travel, all that money wasted to go to a track and everything has to be torn back down. It's a lot of work on people for no racing. Personally, I don't like it. I think it's bad management from Dorna, the fact that we're going of a Thursday. It's very like 1980s. We'll rock up on Thursday, we'll give her another look. If she's good, we'll race Friday. Modern day racing is too serious and too competitive and it's just too much of a big sport for that attitude to we'll rock up Thursday and see what the crack is with it. But it's a bit silly to be going there because I was thinking, like, imagine this was in Ireland. There'd be thousands, hundreds of thousands of people trying to get tickets throughout the year for it. Imagine you're sitting, Rhys, thinking, well, on Thursday, I'll know if my €180 ticket for me and my family to go to Silverstone will even be valid. If the race gets cancelled, what happens with all the fans that have booked tickets? In no disrespect to India, it's not a Spain or a UK or the America where you'd expect that it would be quite easy to get the money back from the government or through the ticket sales. You wouldn't be surprised. We've heard in some of the Asian countries before that when things are a bit funky like this, money goes missing, people don't get their money back. It's just a bit of a mess. So the big thing for me is just the overall paddock having to be built and the fans. I'm just hoping that the government have kind of put the money in to get everything up to spec for Dorna, and that it'll all be something we won't even think about. On Sunday in 2 weeks' time, we'll be having a great talk about how the races are great, and it was great to finally have a GP in India when it's been so deserved for so long, considering motorbikes in India are one of the prime transports, and it's probably, I think, that and China are the biggest markets for motorbike sales. So it makes complete sense to go there for racing, and it's big fans and big kind of atmosphere there. For it'll be great if we go ahead with it. They've just left so much to the last minute. I don't like it because there's so many people that could end up out of pocket, and it's just a bit messy. And I think modern day, I think once or twice a season, you just see Dorna see that they're still slightly small-minded. You wouldn't see a Liberty Media going to Vegas of a Thursday and going, yeah, we'll probably race if it's okay. That wouldn't happen in Formula 1. And we are...
I'm pretty sure Jeddah got homologated on Friday a couple of years ago.
Hardly.
Yeah.
Well, I take it back, so Formula 1 are equally sure.
I'm fairly certain. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure. Maybe it wasn't Friday. I could be wrong, but it was definitely like a similar situation where it was literally got homologated like right before the weekend. But I think it genuinely might have been on a Friday morning.
That is so maybe because again, Jeddah, India,
it's
relatively similar world.
Yeah,
maybe it's like, just that part of the world kind of working a different way to kind of Western Europe or this part of the world.
No, I suppose Jeddah's more Middle East, though. I guess.
Yeah, so, maybe I don't know.
Whereas India's, I mean, I suppose India's also sort of between the Middle East and Asia, I guess. But yeah,
it's just bottom line is just it's wrong to be going and leaving it that late and not knowing because, like you think, right? Fair enough, right? There's 20 trucks with GP go. There's a Moto 2, there's a Moto 3. If you're a Moto 3 rider, right, and say who will we pick out of Moto 3? Colin Vare. Do you think he's strapped with cash to be traveling around the world? Like, if that race doesn't go ahead, like, he's losing out on money. Now, there's obviously so many other people, but he was just kind of a mid-tier Moto 3 rider currently, and again, it's not against him, but just give an example of people. It will be a massive loss if we don't race there, because it will be not only be bad for the championship, we lose a round, it's bad for the surrounding areas, the government, the national kind of treasure of India not getting the race and stuff like that. It's so messy, and I hate the fact we're doing it so late. And maybe, again, if you are right about Jeddah happening of a Friday, maybe that part of the world is slightly different to us, and maybe maybe it was a struggle against time to get this race in. Like you mentioned, maybe it should have been for the 24 season, and Dorn's put pressure on them.
They did have to build a street circuit, which is obviously a bit more thingy with Jeddah.
Yeah,
got to put it together. Seems like it was the Thursday, from what I can say.
Oh, okay, fair enough. So again, you proved me that maybe Liberty Media aren't as... Maybe it's not Dorna, so maybe it's the track. Maybe I'm being too harsh on Dorna, but overall I feel like it's not a great situation.
No, it's certainly not. It's not the kind of thing that you want to see. But hopefully, like we say, if it all goes smoothly, it'll be forgotten. But it's if it ends up in a farce, then like you say, it's a lot of money being wasted, especially like you say for these. Maybe not so much for the riders, in fairness, because most of the riders are paying for their seat anyway. So I don't think like
20, I
don't think like £100 flight is particularly the least there is. It's more like the team personnel and stuff. I would say that they're not going to be balling. So maybe that's the maybe they're going to lose out more. But and fans potentially, we obviously assume that most of the fans will be from India, but there'll probably be people coming from elsewhere. Neighbouring countries and things like that to come in to see the race. So if you're like a MotoGP fan from like Pakistan, for example, I suppose it's like bordering India, so you'd be going over to the Indian Grand Prix. So yeah, it could be a messy situation, but hopefully everything goes to plan. And like you say, we'll be talking this time in 2 weeks about how great that race was and how the circuit's amazing and stuff like that. But I think that pretty much brings this episode of the Motogp Xtra podcast to a close. So if you are watching it on YouTube, please do like the video. It does help us out. And if you listen on Spotify, if you could rate us 5 stars again, that is very appreciated. We do, of course, have the comment section on YouTube or on here now. There is actually a comment section on Spotify, it seems. If you do want to leave us a comment, we will actually see it and actually go and have a look. So any feedback is appreciated, or if there's any topics you want us to talk about, because we have seen as well in some of the comments people have mentioned, and we've tried to integrate them a little bit. But for now, that is the end of this episode, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks for India, hopefully for a good podcast.